Denied first class for being black. 30 minutes later, he fired the entire flight crew. Marcus Hill, the CEO of a rapidly growing tech company, walked confidently toward the airplane's first-class cabin. He had flown thousands of times in his life, but today felt different. "Sir, your ticket, this seat isn't available," the flight attendant said, avoiding eye contact. "I booked this seat weeks ago," Marcus replied, checking his boarding pass. "I'm sorry, sir, it seems there's been a mistake," she stammered. Marcus noticed a subtle smirk on some of the crew's faces. They had no idea who he was, and to them, he was just another passenger. They assumed they could dismiss him. It wasn't just inconvenience, it was humiliation. The same old stereotype he had fought against his entire life, and Marcus wasn't about to let it slide. Marcus shifted slightly in his business class seat, the leather adjusting beneath him with a quiet creak. The cabin was alive with muted activity, the soft hum of engines, the low murmur of passengers chatting, the occasional clatter of trolleys in the aisle. Yet, in this symphony of movement, Marcus noticed things others overlooked. He didn't need to speak or intervene. Observation was his weapon, and he wielded it with precision. His eyes flicked from one crew member to another, not missing a single nuance. The flight attendants moved with practiced efficiency, but there was a pattern in their smiles, a rhythm in their courtesy, and a subtle hierarchy in the attention they offered passengers. Some passengers received warm greetings, eye contact, small gestures that spoke of genuine care. Others were met with brief nods, clipped responses, or even an almost imperceptible shrug of disinterest. Marcus catalogued it all mentally, noting every smile that faltered, every question answered with impatience, every glance that lingered too long on certain individuals. He noticed the way one attendant's tone shifted when speaking to a man in a tailored suit versus a young woman clutching her boarding pass, the way another's posture straightened when a wealthier-looking passenger approached, and the barely there eye roll when someone spoke with an accent. These were tiny things, invisible to most, yet glaringly obvious to someone trained to read human behavior. Marcus had always possessed that ability. It had served him well in business, in negotiations, in situations where one misstep could cost millions. But now, it wasn't about deals or profits. It was about justice, about exposing truths that were normally hidden behind polite smiles and corporate scripts. His phone vibrated quietly in his lap, and he glanced down. A reminder popped up, boarding complete, flight in 15 minutes. He noted it and slipped the phone back into his pocket, the mechanical notification doing nothing to disturb his calm. Most people would have been agitated by such details, frustrated by delays, embarrassed by perceived slights. But Marcus was different. He didn't react impulsively. He observed, he calculated, and then he planned. Within those short minutes, a strategy had already begun to form in his mind, intricate and precise. The plan was not reactive, it was preemptive, designed to expose the inconsistencies, the unprofessionalism, and the subtle biases he had noticed. He didn't need confrontation for the sake of confrontation. No, this was about accountability. Every gesture, every word, every half-hearted apology he witnessed now would later play a part in the unfolding of events. Marcus leaned back further, the seat contouring perfectly to his frame, as if the aircraft itself recognized his authority. He didn't fidget, didn't check his watch, didn't glance around for validation. His mind was entirely engaged, cataloging, remembering, analyzing. The young couple 2 rows ahead, laughing softly, had barely been acknowledged by the attendant who had rushed past them moments ago. He made a mental note. The older gentleman near the window, with a business briefcase tucked at his feet, received the kind of service that seemed almost rehearsed, a choreography of politeness that contrasted sharply with the indifference shown to others. Every observation added a layer to the picture Marcus was building, a picture of the flight crew's true professionalism, or lack thereof. As the cabin filled with the last stragglers, Marcus's attention sharpened. He noticed micro-expressions, a twitch of the eyebrow, a subtle tightening of the jaw, a fleeting hesitation in a smile. To the casual observer, these were meaningless, almost imperceptible. To Marcus, they were signals, indicators of attitude, intent, and bias. He had long since learned that human behavior, when observed closely, rarely lied. And what he was seeing now was telling a story of disparity, of unequal treatment, of tiny injustices perpetrated under the guise of routine service. He allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile, not of malice, but of certainty. He knew the next steps. He knew what needed to happen to ensure accountability, to reveal the inconsistencies in a way that no one could ignore. Marcus didn't act out of anger or pride. He acted out of principle. He understood the importance of timing, of precision, of strategy. Every detail he had observed would be leveraged, not for personal gain, but to correct a system that too often overlooked fairness. His gaze wandered again across the cabin, noting the uneven distribution of attention, the subtle hierarchy of service, the quick apologies whispered under breath when a passenger complained. He memorized faces, recorded tones in his mind, catalogued movements with an efficiency that would have made a trained analyst envious. The flight attendants moved with smooth efficiency, yet the cracks in their performance were unmistakable to Marcus. There were moments when a smile faltered just long enough to reveal impatience, or when a greeting was delivered so mechanically it rang hollow. Marcus saw it all. He could sense tension where none existed openly, detect discomfort in polite conversation, and identify hesitation that others would have brushed off. His mind, a relentless machine of observation and deduction, pieced together the implications. This was not merely a matter of service. It was a reflection of attitudes, prejudices, and assumptions that operated beneath the polished surface of the cabin. Marcus had witnessed it all in boardrooms, in corporate meetings, in high-stakes negotiations, but the setting here was different. The stakes were personal, immediate, and undeniably moral. He allowed himself a quiet, satisfied nod. Yes, he had a plan. It would not be dramatic. It would not be publicized hastily. It would unfold with precision, leaving no room for excuses, no room for deflection. The entire cabin, the crew, and even the passengers would come to understand, in no uncertain terms, that their actions had been noticed and that accountability was inevitable. Marcus leaned back, letting the hum of the engines and the low murmur of passengers settle around him. He didn't need to speak. He didn't need to act just yet. Observation was the first, and perhaps most important, step. And in those quiet moments before the plane pushed back from the gate, Marcus felt a surge of calm determination. The plan was forming, every piece aligning with exacting clarity. This flight, this ordinary journey, was about to become a test, not just of service, but of fairness, professionalism, and integrity. And Marcus, as always, would ensure that the outcome was precise, deliberate, and undeniable. The engines hummed steadily as the plane ascended into the sky, leaving the city's skyline far below. Outside the oval windows, clouds stretched endlessly, soft and tranquil, a stark contrast to the undercurrent of tension brewing within the cabin. Marcus remained seated, his posture relaxed, but his senses acutely alert. Every subtle movement, every whispered exchange, every fleeting glance did not escape him. He had learned long ago that the smallest details often revealed the most significant truths. The flight attendants moved along the aisles with practiced efficiency, yet Marcus noticed the cracks almost immediately. A tray was handed over with impatience, a polite sorry whispered with the weight of annoyance, an eye roll masked by the quick turn of the head. Some passengers were greeted warmly, while others were brushed aside with minimal acknowledgement. Marcus catalogued everything, mentally noting names, positions, and even the cadence of voices. He wasn't watching just for errors, he was watching for patterns of behavior that revealed attitude, bias, or carelessness. The murmurs of passengers blended into a soft background hum, but to Marcus, the cabin was a map of human conduct, each action a point to be analyzed. The young couple in the aisle seats whispered anxiously to one another, their questions met with clipped responses. The elderly man near the window received service that was smooth, efficient, almost rehearsed, in stark contrast to the indifference shown to others. Marcus leaned back, observing, waiting, letting the moments accumulate, knowing that every detail would later have its significance. 30 minutes into the flight, he requested a private word with the chief flight attendant. The woman, tall and sharply uniformed, approached with a professional smile that faltered slightly when she noticed the intensity of Marcus's gaze. In the dimly lit galley, away from the passengers, Marcus opened his company's aviation and travel partnership app on his phone. He swiped smoothly, pulling up records and contract details with a practiced hand. "This flight is part of a corporate agreement with my company," he said calmly, his voice steady, authoritative. "I have the authority to review and terminate this contract immediately if I find misconduct." The attendant laughed nervously, a sound meant to dismiss the gravity of his words. She assumed, as many did, that a wealthy passenger was bluffing, that his threats were hollow, and that decorum would protect her from scrutiny. But Marcus did not bluff. Every glance, every hesitation she displayed was catalogued in his mind. The moments of negligence he had observed were now part of an official record, tied to her branch, her staff, and the reputation of the airline itself. Marcus's mind moved quickly, analyzing options and consequences. Termination was not a step he would take lightly, but accountability was non-negotiable. The crew might have thought their subtle slights and neglectful behavior invisible, but Marcus had seen everything. He noted the way one attendant avoided eye contact when asked a simple question, the way another faked a smile that didn't reach her eyes, the whispering and suppressed laughter as he passed by. These were not isolated incidents. They were a pattern, and patterns, Marcus knew, could not be ignored. He observed their reactions as he spoke, noting micro-expressions that revealed fear, discomfort, and disbelief. They were realizing, perhaps for the first time, that a passenger could wield power silently, strategically, without raising his voice or creating a scene. Marcus didn't need drama, he needed results. He didn't seek humiliation, he sought acknowledgement and correction. The attendant's nervous chuckle faded as she realized the seriousness of the situation. Marcus displayed a few key sections of the app, highlighting corporate agreements, clauses on service standards, and compliance protocols. "Every interaction on this flight matters," he continued, his tone calm but firm. "Discrimination, neglect, or unprofessionalism violates our partnership. I expect immediate adherence to professional standards." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, watching as her confident exterior cracked under quiet scrutiny. Marcus then stepped back, giving her space to process. There was no shouting, no threats, no dramatics. Just facts, authority, and the observation that would hold her accountable. He returned to his seat, his mind still scanning the cabin. He watched as the crew adjusted, more aware now, more cautious, each action now measured. The subtle change in behavior was immediate. The smiles became genuine, the responses attentive, the gestures deliberate. Marcus allowed himself a quiet satisfaction. The flight, he knew, would continue differently now. He had set the tone without confrontation, had demonstrated power without aggression, and had ensured accountability without spectacle. Every decision, every calculation, every observed moment of negligence was now documented, ready to be used if necessary. The rest of the flight stretched ahead, but Marcus's plan was in motion. Every movement, every word, every glance would be monitored, analyzed, and if required, acted upon. He leaned back, fingers lightly tapping the armrest, mind still sharp, vision still clear. The plane hummed steadily through the clouds, passengers oblivious to the subtle storm of authority and oversight that had taken root within the cabin. Marcus's phone remained on, notifications muted, records ready, a silent testament to preparation, precision, and deliberate action. He watched quietly as the crew worked harder, their attentiveness now undeniable, their professionalism now genuine. Marcus did not need to intervene further. The observation alone had reshaped the environment. And yet he remained vigilant. In his experience, true accountability was a living, continuous effort, requiring watchfulness and clarity of purpose. This flight, mundane to most, was now a lesson in oversight, integrity, and consequences, and Marcus, ever methodical, would ensure the lesson was unforgettable. Marcus sat in his business-class seat, the hum of the plane beneath him, a quiet backdrop to the intensity of his focus. The cabin seemed smaller now, more intimate, as he methodically reviewed the materials he had collected. His phone buzzed with notifications, but he ignored them, entirely absorbed in the task at hand. Over the past hour, he had captured every detail of the crew's behavior. Photos of trays mishandled, videos of dismissive gestures, notes on whispers and hushed laughter that revealed bias and unprofessionalism. He had also discreetly spoken with passengers who had been affected by the service or lack thereof, and gathered brief statements confirming what he had observed. Each piece of evidence was catalogued meticulously, time-stamped, cross-referenced with flight logs, and entered into a digital report formatted to corporate standards. Marcus's mind moved quickly, assessing the implications of each action, each lapse, each subtle slight. Most passengers would have let frustration fade after the flight, perhaps mentioned a complaint once, then forgotten. Not Marcus. He understood the weight of accountability and the consequences of negligence. He reviewed the report one final time, ensuring it was concise, professional, and irrefutable. Then he looked up at the chief flight attendant, who now stood rigid in the galley, her earlier confidence entirely gone. Her professional facade had cracked, revealing unease and growing panic. Marcus fixed her with a steady, piercing gaze. "Do you understand what I can do with this information?" he asked, voice calm but sharp, leaving no room for misinterpretation. The attendant's smile, once automatic and dismissive, completely vanished. She swallowed hard, clearly realizing she was no longer in control of the situation. Marcus leaned slightly forward, emphasizing his authority, yet maintaining composure. "You're not just violating professional standards," he continued, "you're damaging the reputation of an entire airline branch, and that's something I can correct immediately." Her lips parted, as if to respond, but no words came. Marcus had anticipated this reaction. He didn't need her explanation or excuses. The evidence spoke for itself. He opened the airline's regional office contact on his phone, the line connecting almost instantly. He introduced himself formally, stating his position and the nature of the corporate agreement between his company and the airline. Then, with measured clarity, he began presenting the evidence. He displayed photos of improperly served meals, videos of crew members whispering behind passengers' backs, notes describing delayed attention, and statements from passengers corroborating the incidents. The corporate representative on the line paused, audibly stunned. Each piece of evidence was organized, time-stamped, and professionally formatted, leaving no room for dispute. The representative asked for confirmation, seeking to ensure the authenticity of the materials. Marcus calmly reiterated the sources, the timestamps, and the official documentation from his company's partnership app. There was no exaggeration, no emotional embellishment, only irrefutable facts. Within moments, the effect of his presentation became apparent. The regional office immediately initiated internal protocols. Orders were issued to suspend the flight crew pending full review, a rare move that surprised even Marcus. But he was not finished. The evidence he had gathered, combined with the clear violation of professional standards, was sufficient to cancel contracts outright. This was not punitive for the sake of punishment. It was accountability executed with precision and authority. The chief flight attendant's eyes widened as she realized the full scope of what had just transpired. The laughter, the whispers, the casual disregard for passengers, every action that had seemed inconsequential moments ago now had consequences. Marcus observed her reaction silently, noting the subtle tremor in her hands, the way her posture stiffened, the faint color drained from her face. It was the embodiment of shock, of understanding that negligence, bias, and unprofessionalism could no longer hide behind the polite curtain of routine service. As the airline confirmed the actions taken, Marcus quietly documented the official confirmation, saving copies for corporate records. He didn't celebrate. He remained methodical, composed, focused. The purpose was never personal revenge, nor ego. It was accountability, fairness, and ensuring that standards were upheld. The passengers, unaware of the unfolding corporate actions, continued their flights, some chatting, others reading, completely oblivious to the precise execution of justice that had just occurred. Marcus allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible nod. Every observation, every photo, every statement had culminated in a result that was both immediate and undeniable. He glanced around the cabin once more, scanning the remaining crew, noting subtle shifts in behavior as they realized the implications. Even those not directly suspended were now more attentive, their actions deliberate, their demeanor professional. Marcus leaned back, fingers lightly tapping the armrest. The evidence had spoken, corporate action had been executed, and the lesson had been delivered without spectacle, without public confrontation, but with clarity and finality. The chief flight attendant, now silent, understood that her position and reputation had been irrevocably affected by choices she had made, choices Marcus had carefully documented and presented. He had acted swiftly, strategically, and without emotion, relying solely on observation, documentation, and the authority granted through legitimate corporate channels. Marcus knew that the impact would ripple beyond this flight, beyond this crew, into the wider culture of accountability within the airline. Standards had been reinforced, and negligence would no longer be invisible. As the plane cruised steadily through the clouds, Marcus returned to his seat, his mind already moving to the next step. Observation, documentation, and action had produced the result he intended, but he knew the work of ensuring fairness and accountability was never complete. Every flight, every interaction, every moment presented opportunities to observe, to act, and to correct. The cabin felt different now, calmer, more attentive, the subtle tension replaced by professional awareness. Marcus allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, not pride, not arrogance, but the quiet confidence of a mission executed flawlessly. The shock revelation had unfolded, not in dramatic gestures or public spectacle, but in meticulous planning, strategic execution, and undeniable evidence. And for Marcus, that was more than enough. The plane touched down smoothly, tires hissing against the runway as the engines throttled back, but the sense of tension and anticipation that had lingered throughout the flight did not dissipate entirely. Marcus remained seated, his hands folded calmly in his lap, eyes scanning the cabin with the same meticulous precision he had maintained since boarding. Around him, passengers whispered to one another, their voices low but charged with astonishment. Word had spread quickly among them, carried by hushed conversations and glances exchanged with curiosity and awe. "Did you see what just happened?" one woman murmured to her companion, nodding subtly in Marcus's direction. "I can't believe a passenger had the authority to do that," another replied, voice trembling with disbelief. The murmurs grew louder as passengers pieced together what had transpired. Some were still processing the abrupt change in the crew's demeanor, the sudden attention to detail, the professionalism that had returned almost instantaneously after Marcus's intervention. Others were speculating about the man himself, his calm composure, the quiet confidence with which he had handled a situation that, under ordinary circumstances, might have escalated into confrontation or chaos. Marcus, however, did not acknowledge the whispers. He did not need to. The effect of his actions had already been felt, reverberating silently through the cabin and beyond. The airline staff, previously confident in their routine and accustomed to complacency, now moved with deliberate care, understanding that oversight could come from unexpected quarters and that accountability could arrive swiftly, without warning. The plane taxied toward the gate, and Marcus watched as the chief flight attendant communicated with ground staff via headset, her posture slightly rigid, every movement measured, her earlier nervousness replaced by a sober acknowledgement of consequence. The corporate repercussions were already in motion. Marcus had not acted impulsively. Every piece of evidence, every photo, every statement from passengers had been compiled, documented, and presented professionally, leaving no room for dispute or misinterpretation. By the time the aircraft reached the gate, the airline had begun internal procedures. The crew was suspended pending review, contracts were being scrutinized, and disciplinary actions were being initiated. The company had issued a formal apology to Marcus personally, a gesture that, while polite and necessary, carried weight only because it acknowledged the seriousness of his position and the authority he wielded. To Marcus, the apology was secondary. It was not about ego or recognition or public acknowledgement. It was about principle. It was about ensuring that standards of professionalism were upheld, that behavior unbefitting a representative of the airline could not go unchecked, and that others would learn the importance of accountability without the need for dramatics or spectacle. As he rose to disembark, he noticed subtle changes in the cabin's atmosphere. Passengers who had once been ignored were now treated with attentiveness and courtesy, crew members moving efficiently and with clear awareness that their conduct was being monitored. Marcus's presence alone had transformed the environment, a silent reminder of the impact of authority exercised with precision, clarity, and calm. Outside, the airport staff recognized him immediately as he passed through the jet bridge, though none of them fully understood the details of the intervention that had taken place aboard the aircraft. Marcus maintained his composed demeanor, greeting a few familiar faces with polite nods, acknowledging but not dwelling on attention. His focus was on the principle he had enforced, the precedent he had set. No one, regardless of position, title, or circumstance, should feel entitled to disrespect or discriminate against others. Throughout the terminal, whispers followed him. Passengers repeated the story in fragments: the decisive actions, the calm authority, the documentation, the immediate corporate response. In their astonishment, many began to reflect on the subtle injustices they themselves had tolerated in daily life, small acts of negligence or bias that had gone unnoticed or unchallenged. Marcus observed them quietly, noting the ripple effect of his actions, understanding that influence extended far beyond immediate consequences. He had intervened not out of revenge, not out of personal affront, but out of the conviction that fairness, accountability, and professionalism must be defended actively, not passively. Every detail, every documented incident, every corporate action reinforced a single point: authority, when exercised responsibly, has the power to correct behavior, reshape culture, and instill respect. He walked through the airport with calm assurance, aware that the story of his intervention would spread, inspiring conversations, debates, and reflection. Yet he remained detached from the spectacle. The point had never been recognition, but principle. Marcus reflected quietly on the dynamics he had observed aboard the flight: the initial negligence, the subtle biases, the dismissive attitudes, and noted how easily they could have been overlooked by someone less attentive. He considered how many individuals in positions of power either ignored such behavior or lacked the tools to address it effectively. This realization reinforced his commitment not just to accountability, but to leading by example, demonstrating that observation, documentation, and decisive action could create tangible change without resorting to theatrics. As he retrieved his luggage, he thought about the passengers who had witnessed the transformation firsthand. Their astonishment, their whispers, their acknowledgement of what had occurred were testament to the impact of measured authority. Marcus knew that in every sphere of life, corporate, social, personal, there would always be moments when integrity was challenged, when standards were tested. It was not the title or the status that enforced respect. It was the willingness to observe carefully, act decisively, and uphold principles consistently. Boarding a taxi outside the terminal, he allowed himself a brief reflection on the day's events. The flight crew, suspended pending review, would now have time to consider their conduct. Back on the ground, Marcus stepped off the plane, greeted by reporters who had caught wind of the incident. "This isn't about me," Marcus said. "It's about ensuring that respect and professionalism are non-negotiable. If we don't hold people accountable, nothing changes." The story went viral. The airline had to overhaul its training programs, and the former crew members faced serious career consequences. Marcus didn't gloat. He simply walked away, satisfied that one small act of decisiveness could create a ripple effect, reminding the world that authority, integrity, and courage mattered more than ignorance and prejudice.